Good morning and welcome to Practical Christian Lessons. We are in Wisdom of Sirach 48 today. And just a heads up, next week we will be starting our Wesleyan series on theology. We're starting with the means of grace. Watch our intro video from last week to figure out a little bit more about that. And then Monday plans for that is going to be doing a Jacob Arminius reading because we didn't do it this week. And our Saturday next week is going to be a live stream. And that will be our first video for other than the introduction into our Wesleyan series. And I'll also try to do a local recording to put it up on the channel proper for anyone who would miss it. So recommend checking those out. I'll have a community post sometime this week. Maybe it might have already been up by now on the exact time that's going to be happening. I'll figure that out. But come check it out. It's going to be great. It's going to be over the three primary means of prayers, reading scriptures, and the Eucharist. Communion for some of you. And it's going to be great. For now, Wisdom of Sirach 48. Elijah. Then Elijah the prophet rose up like fire, and his word burned like a lamp. He brought a famine upon them, and in his zeal he reduced them in number. By the word of the Lord he shut up heaven, and also 3 times he brought down fire. So by your wonders you were honored, O Elijah. And who can boast like you? You raised the dead from death, and from Hades by the word of the Most High. You brought down kings to destruction, and from their bed those who had been honored. You heard rebuke at Sinai, and at Horeb the judgments of punishment. You anointed kings for retribution, and prophets to serve after you. You were taken up in a fiery whirlwind, in a chariot of flaming horses. It is written that you will come at the proper time with rebukes, to calm the wrath of God before it breaks forth in fury, to turn the heart of the father to the son, and to restore the tribes of Jacob. Blessed are those who saw you, and who fell asleep with love, for indeed we surely live. Elijah was covered by the whirlwind, and Elisha was filled with his spirit. And in his days he trembled before no ruler, and no one oppressed him. No word could overcome him, and after death his body prophesied. As in his life he did wonders, so even in death his works were amazing. For all these things that people did not repent, nor did they turn away from their sins until their land was plundered. Then they were scattered over all the earth. But of people few in number were left, and a ruler in the house of David. Some of them did what was virtuous, but some multiplied sins. Hezekiah fortified his city, and brought water into its midst. He dug through the hard rock with iron, and constructed cisterns for the water. In his days Sennacherib came up and sent out the Rabshakeh, and he retreated. Then he lifted up his hand against Zion, and boasted in his arrogance. So their hearts and hands were shaken, and they suffered pain like women giving birth. Then they called upon the merciful Lord, stretching out their hands toward him. Thus the Holy One quickly heard them from heaven, and rescued them by the hand of Isaiah. He struck the camp of the Assyrians, and his angel destroyed them. For Hezekiah did what was pleasing to the Lord, and grew strong in the ways of David his father, which Isaiah the prophet commanded, the one great and faithful in his vision. In his days the sun moved backward, and lengthened the life of the king. With a great spirit he saw the last things, and encouraged those who mourned in Zion. He showed what was to come to the end of time, and the hidden things before they came to pass. I just want to have a quick historical note. These aren't just devotionals that we do on the channel with these. I also like the history part. I'm a giant history nerd. When it talks about Elijah returning, that's something a lot of us have probably heard growing up in church. There's 2 specific ways people thought that could happen. One was a literal return of Elijah, that he would be resurrected and he would be walking among the Israelites once again. Though how they would know him, I'm not necessarily sure, unless there was some oral tradition being passed down of his description. But the other thought of it was, and this was common in prophetic tools, or prophetic language and in rhetorical tools used by people throughout the ages, was that Elijah represented a figure. So it would be a figure like Elijah rather than necessarily Elijah himself. Those were the two popular trains of thoughts. Clearly, in the New Testament, it was the latter. We see it in John the Baptist. He says, I am not Elijah, because he's not Elijah, but he is the figure that fills the role Elijah was foretold to come and refill. And that's just that. I also thought of that hearing the Isaiah has revealed the mystery part here at the end. I think that's great. But I think it's also important to look at the history, even just in this one chapter in these 3 sections. But as Jesus ben Sirach is building up in these last chapters, going through the histories, is we can see our own history of the church through this same sort of timeline, right? Elijah and Elisha, Jesus. Let's just use an analogy here. This isn't laid out. This isn't exactly accurate. Go with me. Elijah and Elisha. We can expand this to Jesus, the apostles, and the church fathers following. And Hezekiah and Isaiah, these faithful people that Jesus being the head, and then the people who have followed him, who were faithful and true to Christ, to God, and to the church's mission. And then not just in our early stages of church history, but all throughout our history, of these constant battles of people who were turning from the Lord, of heretics who would rise up and teach things like Jesus was created, which was taught a long time ago, long before Mormons, Jehovah's Witnesses came along and started teaching that same heresy. That was around a long time ago as well. You get things like the Gnostics, who are like, the body is evil in a prison and bad for us. We need to be free of it. We shouldn't care about it. And you get some of those same ideas that pop up today, whether that's New Age spirituality or in some very strange flavors that are trying to call themselves Christian, and whether or not they are is irrelevant because they're trying to hold on to this thing that they really need to let go of. Stuff like that just keeps popping up throughout church's history. And there's this constant sort of struggle to try and hold true to the Bible. We are very much like our ancestors that wandered in the wilderness, the stiff-necked people who need leaders and those who are truly following after the Lord to help guide us and steer us and keep us centered on it. But we also have to let them and not be so stiff-necked ourselves that we don't let them. As I almost knocked my cup over. And I think that's something really important to reflect on as we're going through here. I know I've talked about like reflecting on what kind of leaders and how we should be treating our leaders, how we should be reverent to God throughout these. But we also need to sort of think about, what does it look like for us as individuals to submit to those above us and to strive after the Lord, yes, in personal piety and devotion, but also through submission to our leaders. We are told in the New Testament, submit to those above you, to those who have authority over you, as if they are the Lord, because that's a way to show honor to the Lord. It's the same with the commandment of honor thy father and thy mother. And for some of us, that is much easier, right? I'm blessed with amazing parents. I'm so grateful for them. I wish I had known when I was younger how great it was. I would have caused a lot less problems, and I do feel really bad for the giant butt I was. But some people aren't blessed with that, and it's a lot harder to do. And it's the same with our own authority figures in our society all the time. Some we agree with, some we don't, right? But we get people who are like, not my president in the church. No, that's a problem. They are your president. Whether or not you like it, you don't have to agree with everything they do. You don't have to agree with the majority of what they say or do. But you do need to understand that they are an authority. And when we're told to submit to the authorities above us, we're told to submit to both the godly and the ungodly. Now, of course, there's an extent to which authority over us has its line, right? Doesn't bring us into sin. Don't blaspheme. Don't do something unholy because you're told to. But submit as far as you can. That is a clear command in the scriptures. And that's something, especially here in the West, we have a lot of trouble with. Myself included. I'm not innocent of this. Even today still, I like to buck and push against authority systems, and I've gotten a lot better about it, but I still have a lot of room to grow in that area. And it's hard. It's really hard, especially when you disagree with those above you, to submit and say, you're the one in charge. This is how you've decided to do it. We're going to do it your way. And not try to undermine them or talk about it behind their back and undermine what's going on that way. It's no. This is how you've decided it's going to be done. I might not like it. I might have some complaints. But ultimately, you're the one in charge. I need to submit to what you're doing here. And I think that would help the Western church a whole lot if we started doing that. And it would also mean, part of this as well would be when we have leaders and authorities who are, especially in the church, who are like trying to steer people away from the godly paths, being like, hey, this can't happen. This is a no-no. If you continue down this path, you are no longer a leader in submission to the Lord, and we cannot be in submission under you. This is a big problem. This has to stop. And that's something like creeds and confessions is helpful with. That's a whole topic for another time. But it's super important we kind of get this mindset. And of course, God and Scripture are the ultimate authority over us. We must be in submission to God first and foremost. But we are still called into these other forms of submission under Him. So just something to think about and something to keep in mind, and something I suspect all of us in the West will, for a very long time, need help with and continually struggle with. I'm sure some people, if you find, and this is, I know I've talked about this in another video, find a mentor or such, especially in something you're wanting to grow in, who is good at that thing that you want to grow in, and be like, hey, help me with this. That if they've got it down, or as far as you can tell they've got it down, go learn from that person, because they have figured it out in their walk with the Lord, and they can teach you. With that, you guys go in peace. Have a wonderful day, and God bless.